what about your ideal franchise owner? Since they're not actually doing the work, hands-on, and they're not cleaning the homes, who is your ideal franchise owner?
Most of our franchisees, and it's quite a mix. We're at around plus or minus 25 locations now. Most times they're white collar professionals who either are in a 9 to 5 and want to leave. And we are a little bit unique where we do allow people to hang on to their 9 to 5 for a certain time period before taking the plunge into doing full-time entrepreneurship.
Okay.
However, all of our franchisees want to do this full-time at some point. So most of them are either first-time entrepreneurs or relatively new entrepreneurs. We don't have as many what I call portfolio investors. That's not our target market of people who acquire locations and they have a portfolio of 10 or 20 businesses. That's not typically our model. We want to work with people who really want the support system we have. And honestly, we have an incredible support system. We have a dedicated business coach, multi-pod calls, a Slack group, like just unlimited amount of support. So the people who would really value the support, I think, are the best fit for our franchises. Mm-hmm. Most of them are maybe 9 to 5. Either they hate their boss or like they just don't like the fact that they have to ask for permission for time off. They want to spend more time with their family. They want to make uncapped income. This is kind of a lot of the pain points I hear when it comes to our franchises. So we allow them to dip their toe in and then eventually go full force when they see traction start happening.
Okay. And how big are the territories and how are the territories designed?
Yeah. So it's based off the household. So a normal cleaning franchise, Frank, probably gives like 49, 50,000 households per territory. Our territories honestly are pretty large. 150 to 250,000 households is where we end up. I just don't want franchise stepping on each other's toes. So we never really oversell territories in any given market. And it's based off of households, like I said. So some large metros like Houston, it's probably gonna have multiple franchises, but other place like Greenville, South Carolina, it's probably just gonna be one.
So Neel, just because I know just a little bit about short-term rentals, because being in the business, I know that there are some markets that have a lot of short-term rentals versus others, that don't. Do you guys use any kind of third party like an AirDNA or a company that will tell you exactly how many Airbnb homes are in this territory?
It's a good question. We actually do. So it's kind of an intersection with number of households in general and also vacation rentals in the market. Now, because we do both residential and Airbnb, it doesn't have to be a market which has a lot of Airbnbs or just only a lot of residential. Often, some of our markets, honestly, are in suburb areas where there's no Airbnbs or there's very few Airbnbs. And it's okay. It doesn't matter. There's so many ways of making money in this business model because things get dirty all the time. One thing I will say is I get approached a lot from people who are in like Gatlinburg, Tennessee, or Aspen, and they're like, Neel, this market's going to crush. We have so many Airbnbs. No one has cleaners. This is going to be awesome. Honestly, those ones are harder because we're a staffing company first. And if there's no labor there, we can't do anything. Right. So oftentimes I like the markets which are not too dense in vacation rentals because many times that means they're like a mountain town or vacation rental town. So besides that, I always tell people I love if I see competition. They've proven out the market. They've done all the hard work. I don't have to do any research to figure out whether this is going to work or not. If there's a cleaning company there who's making good money, that's fantastic. That means we can go in there and also make good money.
Absolutely. So kind of step back for a moment. You talk about how you founded the company in 2013 and then you franchised in infamous 2020, like so many of the founders who we talked to, which I love. You grinded through, you franchised during the darkest days possible. It's going to make you stronger, by the way. You are going to be able to handle any tough road that's ahead because you started out during winter, so to speak, of the economy. Tell me about your franchise journey and share with us on what that defining moment was that you said, I've got to franchise this business after doing it for 7 years.
Man, so I think it was 2018, 2019, where I was trying to figure out how to expand. My corporate location at the time, I think we hit like around 2 million or so. And I was thinking, should we open up more locations? How do I go about with expansion? And I finally spoke with someone who said, you could either do the Starbucks model where you open new locations and they're all corporate owned, you have a general manager in place, or you could do the franchise model. And you look at one. And I remember thinking like franchising, that's like what my parents did. That's like, old school, like, why would I franchise? But I started looking at it more and I realized like, oh, this is a fantastic way to expand. Why? Because a lot of our locations need a local presence, or at least an owner who's really focused on it and has ownership over that entity. Because Airbnb hosts need it, residential hosts need it. It makes things move a lot faster. But honestly, like leading up to it, I was never in franchising before. I was never a franchisee. I didn't know how this whole industry worked. So I was kind of like a 51% yes, 49% no. Like it could have been a coin flip. And I was like, I guess I'm not franchising. And then finally, it got to the point where I said, okay, let me give it a shot. And it's not a cheap, okay, let's just try this. It's very pricey to open up a franchise.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of decision, and then finally decided to pull the trigger and do it. And February 2020 is when we got the FDD filed. I got the LLC, and I was ready to rock. And then, boom, COVID happened,
Shut down.
and yeah, shut down immediately.
And now, so you have 26 franchises open in 8 states. Over the last 4 years, you probably have had an enormous education in franchising and being a franchisor. What's maybe one of the biggest surprises you would say that you've experienced since being this franchise founder now?
That's a great question. I think every stage is so different. Like when we launched 2020, we awarded one franchise. 2021, we awarded a second franchise. So it was very slow growth. And it's always hard. Like I think on the franchisor side or anyone in business, you look at comparisons, right?
Mm-hmm.
You say, well, that franchisor just sold 100 units. Like that's incredible. Why am I not doing that? Or if you're an individual business owner, that person just got to 10,000 per month in 1 month. How is that possible? It's just, there's always this comparison game. So I think the first 2-3 years of me figuring out was just a slog. There's a grind. You question yourself of like, am I doing the right thing? Why is this not going as fast as I thought it would? X, Y, and Z. And you realize there's different sets of problems at different stages. And I realize now my franchise journey is very parallel to how it was when I was starting my corporate entity back in 2013, where at the beginning, your main problem is lead gen, right? That's typically a problem. Like you're trying to get more customers in, same as on the franchise end. How do I get people to even know who I am to inquire about me? That's the only problem. There's no use of building a support system if you don't know who you're supporting. Now that we have enough and there's kind of a steady flow of people who are coming in, same as the cleaning business, then the shift focuses to, cool, how do I make sure they're as successful as possible? Right. And honestly, I'm so happy that we did not go from 0 to 100 in 1 year. We've never worked with brokers, no franchise sales organizations, nothing like that. It's all organic.
Good for you.
And I think because of that, it's allowed us to take the money and reinvest it 100% back into franchise support. So we have a good amount of people on our actual corporate team to help out the franchisees in a big program, and we reinvest in R&D for them. And I think that's been a really fun shift for me. Is moving away from, oh my God, how do I find people to know who even we are to inquire, to now, okay, cool. How do we just make this the most incredible support system for franchisees? So that's the current problem I'm solving. I'm sure, later on it's going to be a different set of problems, but right now it's just, let's just make sure everyone's successful and they're supported, and how do we do that the best?
That's a great insight. In that, I will tell you, I asked that question to many of the podcast guests. Not many people bring up the fact that when they franchised, they were replicating the same problem that they had when they first started their business, but it's really what happens. We think because we're franchising the business, we've got strategy licked, we know how to be successful, but you are starting over because you're starting over a brand new business, and it's
completely different business too.
Yeah. It's the same hockey stick growth where it's so slow growth, but you're right. It is a completely different business, and reality kind of hits you between the eyes when you start franchising, because you get a little cocky starting out thinking, okay, this is going to be great. Everybody's going to want to buy one from me. And in many cases we find out, no, I'm in a field that is so crowded where there are so many opportunities. I mean, heck, there's 4,000 franchise opportunities. So it's very hard to differentiate yourself. What do you think, since you don't use brokers, you don't use an outside franchise sales organization, what's been your secret to success to selling 26? How do you sell your first dozen?
I think at the beginning, and again, this is very parallel, just like you said, Frank, for your own business or the franchise business. At the beginning, it's founder based. You are the face of the company for sure. Let's say you start your own cleaning business like my franchise is. If the founder, the owner of the business is the one checking in with customers, making sure they're good, things are going to grow faster. It's just fact, right? Because there's so much more of a personal touch, there's ownership. So right now, I'm the face of the franchise. All of our leads are pretty much social media based. They either through my personal brand, through a podcast, through maybe something on YouTube that I was featured on. It's all personal brand building and letting people know it exists. And many times, as long as you put yourself out there enough times with enough consistency, people will find you. It's crazy amount of people like who said, "Hey, I found you on YouTube," and I don't really post on YouTube, but you get on like a YouTube black hole. You search something, you end up somewhere else, you end up somewhere else. And so as long as you're putting stuff out, I feel like eventually, people will find you and you're putting out valuable content. So for me, that's been the secret so far. And again, like I don't know if we get to a certain point, territories sell out. If that strategy still holds, that's a problem I'll deal with, I think, when we get there. But so far, the organic approach for me has been very rewarding because it also makes me focus on how do I give the most value. And many times now I'm able to utilize a lot of the things I'm teaching franchises as well as putting it out in the public. And it kind of dual purposes a lot of things and makes me grow in a different way. So for me so far as a franchisor, that's been by far the most successful is simply social media and personal branding.
Speaking of personal branding, why don't we talk about the Freedom Formula podcast that you host?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I host a podcast. I started it 3 years ago in the midst of COVID. Me and at that time I had a co-host, and we were like, hey, we both run remote local businesses, which is local business you could run completely remotely. Why don't we start a podcast? That guy, his name's Naveed, now became franchisee number 1 of MaidThis, actually.
Sweet.
And yeah, the podcast, it's about how to achieve time, location, and or financial freedom. So currently I interview different people who've achieved one of those different facets of life. And it's a little bit different from normal podcasts because I think a lot of business podcasts focus on financial freedom, which is great. And a lot of people want to unlock that. But I think for me, the truth is time freedom and location freedom are infinitely more valuable, right? So how do you really unlock those? And I think some people kind of crack the code when it comes to that. So I interview people who've cracked the code in one of those 3 buckets of life and just reverse engineer what they did.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fumey, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.